I'll call to order this meeting of the Oversight Committee. It is 8:30 a.m. Ms. Payne, please proceed with the roll call.
Dr. Cummings,
Present.
Mr. Margot,
Here.
Dr. Hernandez,
Here.
Mr. Montgomery,
Here.
Dr. Patel,
Here.
Dr. Rice,
Here.
Dr. Rosenfeld.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Good heavens, we heard you say, wonderful. We have a quorum. For the record, Dr. Rice and Mr. Montgomery are joining us via video conference. Today, this is an option permitted by the Open Meetings Act, and they will count towards our quorum as long as we can see and hear from them. Occasionally, if we don't hear from them, it's okay. We rely upon CPRIT's IT team to make this work and appreciate what they do behind the scenes to ensure our meetings run smoothly. Members, you have the draft minutes from the May 17th Oversight Committee meeting in your agenda packet behind tab 1. Are there any corrections to the minutes as circulated? Hearing none, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the May 17th Oversight Committee meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Our next item is public comment. Texans created CPRIT. Opening our meetings with a public comment underscores this board's commitment to transparency and accountability. Ms. Doyle, has CPRIT received any requests to provide public comment?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Roberts will provide the CEO's report. Mr. Roberts.
Academic Research and Prevention Awards at the recommended level of $49.4 million. We will have nearly $7 million unawarded in fiscal 2023. This balance does remain with the agency for use in later fiscal years through legislative appropriations. The other item I have to discuss is several personnel changes that have occurred since we last met. And I'm not sure all of these folks are here, but when I call out your name, if you'd wave or stand to be recognized. But Dr. Miriam Casillas joined us on June 1st. Yeah, I thought she was here as program manager for academic research. She comes to us from Texas Tech University Health Sciences Center, El Paso. She has many years of operational and leadership experience in research, compliance, and epidemiology. Kathy Harkness is not here today. She's under the weather, unfortunately, but she joined us recently as a grant accountant. We have two part-time grant compliance specialists who began on August the 4th, Debbie Mitchell, who has years of experience in auditing and accounting of state and local government. She's worked at CPRIT previously as a contract compliance employee since 2020, so you may have seen her around. In addition, Martin Rivera has a background in auditing with the state. He began at CPRIT as a contract compliance employee in March 2023. Michael Bedford, who is behind you, you will recognize him. You've seen him before. He's now with us permanently as an information technology support specialist. He's been doing contract work with us since January of 2022. That's the happy news. Unfortunately, and I think most of you are aware of this now, that we are losing Tracy Davies, the Chief Strategic Initiative and Intellectual Property Officer. Friday will be her last official day with CPRIT. She has been an enormous asset to the agency and to me, but she has an opportunity that would not let her go. She tried to resist it, but finally, we've all encountered this in our lifetimes. It just got to be too big of an opportunity. The downside that I like to gig her on constantly is she will be relocating to Southern California. So that's her problem. With that, Mr. Chairman, I believe my report is concluded. I'll try and answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions for Mr. Roberts? Thank you, Mr. Roberts. The chair recognizes Mr. Burgess and Mr. Nance to present the Chief Compliance Officer's report.
I'll go ahead and take this one. Just take this one.
And Vince promised us today that he'll make it fun.
That's a setup right there, I think. My compliance certificate, making it fun already. Behind tab 3, you'll find my compliance program update. And I want to say that Mr. Nance got the memo about the haircut and the suit, so he's good to go. But I'm going to pass it over to him to highlight some of our compliance activities for this quarter.
Thank you, Vince. Men in blue are here.
Right on.
So we've had a productive quarter for the compliance program. As you can see, starting on page 3.1, we had 4 entities that had not filed 5 academic research reports and 1 prevention report. So that's well below our self-imposed threshold that we have. So we're in good shape there. We also performed 496 second level reviews of FSRs. Only 7% needed resubmission for this quarter, which is really good. We've generally been trending about double that. So we're excited to report and see that. And then finally, on page 3.3, it's been an active quarter for our training and support. We conducted 3 new authorized signing official trainings this past quarter for University of Houston Downtown, Invectus, and Acilia. We also conducted our second of a 3-part series of our annual compliance training webinars for our 3 various programs. We had approximately 78 grantee staff attend those trainings. The next one will be in sometime in October. That'll be the last one for this calendar year. We also had 3 new grantee training webinars for Seven Hills Pharma, Onco Response, and Omni Nano Pharmaceuticals. Some of our new grantees getting trained up. And then lastly, we had an ad hoc training with one of our grantees to provide some technical assistance support with some required reporting just to get them get some of their staff members trained up. And I believe we trained a little over 20 of their staff members. And that's all we have to report. If you have any questions, we'll be glad to answer those.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Burgess, Mr. Nance? Hearing none. Turning to the certification of the award slates that we will consider today, Mr. Burgess will provide the compliance certification report for the academic research and prevention awards.
Thank you, Dr. Patel. In your proposed grant award booklet, beginning on page 82, you'll find my compliance certification. And as you are aware, in the certification, I detailed every step in the peer review process. After review of documentation submitted by GDIT, that's our third-party grants administrator, in consultation with CPRIT staff and also BFS, which is our third-party observer, I reviewed all that documentation. I'm satisfied that the review process was followed, and I certified these award recommendations for your consideration this morning.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Hearing none. Thank you, Mr. Burgess.
Thank you.
Turning to the Chief Scientific Officer's report, the chair recognizes Dr. LeBeau to provide the academic research program update and introduce the program integration committee's grant awards and recommendations, sorry.
Dr. Patel. I'm delighted to present. Thank you. I'm delighted to present the Scientific Review Council and the Program Integration Committee recommendations for FY23 Cycle 2 and recruitment cycles 23.5 and 23.6, which includes 20 awards from 6 grant mechanisms totaling $36,044,691. And I will refer you to page 4 of the proposed grant award, which describes all of the slate that I will be presenting to you today. Thank you. The applications that are proposed for funding are shown in this slide, the 6 mechanisms that are proposed. And as you'll see, it includes 1 grant for the Texas Connect for Cancer Prevention Study Award, 3 new mechanisms for TREC eligible institutions, including a postdoctoral training award, a major instrumentation award, and pilot study awards, and recruitment awards. The priorities that are addressed are shown in the next slide. And I think that this is an excellent representation of the Oversight Committee approved priorities for the academic research program. We have 10 recruitment of outstanding cancer researchers to Texas to propose. We have a number of investment in core facilities, a broad range of investigator-initiated research projects, 5 grants that address childhood and adolescent cancers, and 5 grants that address drug discovery. Next slide, please. So I will begin with the first award, which is the Texas Connect for Cancer Prevention Study Award. And this is shown on pages 5 to 6 of your program proposed grant award book. We received 4 awards and 1 is recommended by the Scientific Review Council. And this is the application from Baylor Research Institute. And as you recall, the Texas Connect for Cancer Prevention Study is to establish a Texas Connect for Cancer Prevention cohort of 25,000 adults. And this will be in collaboration with the NCI Connect study. And this prospective longitudinal cohort will address priorities in cancer research, early detection, and etiology research, with the goal of identifying underlying factors that underlie cancer risk among Texans. With your permission, I'll just go ahead through the entire slate.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. I'll now present the 3 TREC awards. And as I mentioned, these are new RFAs that have been introduced for the first time for TREC eligible institutions. The first award is the Major Instrumentation Award, which is to enhance the research capacity by supporting the major purchase of major instruments for 1 or more core facilities. We received 5 applications, and the SRC has recommended 3 be put forward. The first is an application from Texas Tech University Health Sciences Center for a fluorescence activated cell sorting, the FACS ARIA fusion system, which is really a state-of-the-art cell sorting system that will be used both for research studies, but also for for the analysis of patient samples in the context of Children's Oncology Group and NANT clinical trials. The second is an application from Texas A&M University, which seeks to acquire an instrument suite to set up a high throughput screening core for small molecule-based drug discovery. And this is an important component of their newly funded TREC award, as well as the institution's drug discovery research efforts. The third is an award to Baylor University, which is seeking to purchase a core imaging instrumentation for a multimodal imaging system for small animals. And this is the IVIS spectrum, which allows them to do optical and micro CT imaging of small animals. And they intend to use these studies for preclinical cancer research studies. Next slide, please. The next award is the Postdoctoral Research Award. And the goal is to support training in the conduct of research and ultimately the retention as faculty of the most qualified, outstanding postdoctoral students that have been recognized by their institutions to have high potential and strong interest in pursuing careers as independent cancer researchers. And we received 3 applications, and one has been recommended to put forward to you. And this is an application by the University of Texas at El Paso. As you are aware, UTEP is currently conducting research on cancer disparities in Hispanic patients with support from several large center grants, including the TREC award from CPRIT. The TREC award enhances their ability to recruit new faculty. This award will complement that program by enabling them to establish an institutional postdoctoral program and to recruit outstanding postdoctoral fellows, especially from groups that are underrepresented in science. The last award is the Pilot Study Award. And thank you. And this is shown on pages 9 to 12 of your book. We received 14 applications for pilot studies, and 5 have been recommended for consideration for funding. I'll give you a moment to just read the titles and just mention as you're doing so that I think that this is a really nice slate of applications because it covers a broad range from basic science studies to translational studies and studies that have important ramifications for the development of new therapies. It also includes studies that are relevant to prevention by the last study being studying the link between obesity and the risk of developing cancer. And it also, these 5 awards also address some very aggressive cancers such as pancreatic cancer, liver cancer, and acute myeloid leukemia in the elderly. So that completes our slate of the TREC RFAs. Moving to our recruitment awards, we have 10 awards to put forward to you, 1 established investigator and 9 first-time tenure track awards. The first is a recruitment of an established investigator. The University of Texas Health Science Center at San Antonio is seeking to recruit Dr. Simon Gaither as the Mays Family Endowed Chair in Inherited Oncogenesis and the inaugural director for a new center for inherited oncogenesis. Dr. Gaither has an internationally acclaimed program in defining the genetic epidemiology and functional biology of cancer risk variants. And he focuses on integrating data on the multifactorial basis of familial and sporadic cancer in breast and ovarian cancer with mutations in BRCA1 or BRCA2 genes. But he also, what's unique about his program is that he integrates data on ancestry, environmental exposures, and lifestyle and treatment outcomes to really come up with a very unique risk profile for individual patients. And he will pursue to expand this program in San Antonio. The next set of 9 recruits are first-time tenure track recruits. And the first individual is Dr. Graham Irwin, who is being recruited by Baylor College of Medicine and is coming from Stanford University. He is a very talented scientist who works in a unique area, which is understanding how repetitive sequences which occur in the human genome can expand and how this contributes to progression and therapeutic vulnerabilities in cancer. And he proposes to use genetic and chemical approaches to uncover new classes of these repeats in cancer and to target drugs to these sequences. The next individual is Dr. Michael Robertson, who is being recruited also to Baylor College of Medicine, also from Stanford University. Dr. Robertson is a structural biologist and an expert in cryo-EM, and he has already contributed to our understanding of signaling proteins and how they form dynamic complexes on cell membranes. He will couple cryo-EM structure analysis with molecular dynamic simulations to elucidate the conformation of complexes of membrane receptors and to design cancer therapeutics based on these structures. And I should just point out that he has also recently received a NIH Pathway to Independence prestigious award that he will be bringing with him to Texas. The next candidate is Dr. Xiaofeng Qi, who is also a structural biologist, who also is an expert in cryo-EM. And he has also studied membrane proteins, but in this case, he has focused more on studying the hedgehog cell signaling proteins. But he's now switching to study the proteins on T cell membranes that regulate the immune checkpoints in the microenvironment. His goal being to tweak those to enhance their ability to regulate response to immunotherapy. The next candidate is Dr. Simon Eschweiler, who is being recruited to the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center from Princeton University. Dr. Eschweiler is an accomplished cancer immunologist who is proposing to devise novel immunotherapies by using mechanism-guided approaches. He plans to identify novel cellular targets for therapy and assess their clinical validity to develop and test immunotherapies against these targets and to rationally combine these therapies with the existing treatment options to optimize efficacy. The next candidate is Dr. Zunlong Qi, who is being recruited to the University of Texas at Austin from Max Planck Institute of Biochemistry in German. Dr. Qi is also a structural biologist, extremely talented, who has been studying virus assembly. And he has been imaging virus intermediates from infected cells to understand how viruses enter the cell and how they replicate. And this has been used to develop vaccines. He is now turning his attention to hepatitis virus B and C and their role in liver cancer with the long-term goal of using structural information to impact the development of new vaccine-based cancer therapies. The next candidate is Dr. Varun Venkataramani, who is being recruited to Baylor College of Medicine from the University of Heidelberg. Dr. Venkataramani has made very significant discoveries in neuro-oncology, specifically that he has identified direct tumor to neuron synaptic connections and shown that these are electrically active and that they drive tumor progression. So he is now going to examine these neuron tumor networks over time and to identify molecular and cellular regulators of this phenomena that can be used therapeutically to treat brain cancer. The next candidate is Dr. Chen Kao, who is being recruited to the University of Texas, Dallas from Princeton University. She is a accomplished bioengineer who is proposing to build a programmable tumor and tumor microenvironment. Essentially to use 3D printing to deposit varying components of the tumor ecosystem on a chip and to be able to tweak that system by varying the types of components that she prints. And to use that information then for multi-omics studies to survey the cell dynamics, how the cells respond, and discover what are the regulatory elements that regulate their response. And she will study breast cancer initiation and progression. And I should add that she is also bringing an NIH Pathway to Independence Award with her to Dallas. The next application is Dr. Chen Yin, who is being recruited to the University of Texas in Austin from Stanford University. She is a bioengineer and immunologist who has expertise in material science and engineering. And she plans to use nanoparticle fabrication to develop particles that are composed of polymers that are conjugated with an agonist that can activate and enhance the anti-tumor response, immune response in glioblastoma multiforme. And our last candidate is Dr. Anna Kawili, who is being recruited to Southern Methodist University and is currently at University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center. And I'm very pleased to say that this will be our first award to Southern Methodist University. Dr. Wiley has made some very novel discoveries regarding the P53 tumor suppressor gene. And she has shown that her data suggests that P53 may actually restrict the mobility of transposable elements by repressing their transcription. And what she's proposing to do now, well, she's hypothesizing that P53 acts as a tumor suppressor in part, through suppressing these transposable elements. And she is now seeking to prove that using Drosophila and zebrafish models to determine how the various isoforms of P53 can either activate genes or repress genes by binding to the same promoters or same DNA sequences, and how P53 can mediate the repression of transposons. So that is our slate of recruitment candidates. I'm happy to address any questions you have about this slate or to move on to the proposed RFAs.
Thank you, Dr. Lebeau. Dr. Hernandez?
Morning, Michelle. On the very first one, with Dr. Sanchez on that Connect project, I just wanted to, if you could supply, not right now, but later after, can you give more information on it? Because in reading into it, it appears that it's just gathering data, right? And collecting some urine samples and stuff. And a lot of it should be built into the EMR already in our clinics, and their nonprofit apparatus that they have. I'm sure they have EMR. So it just seems, I just wanted to know how they're going to utilize that as funds, because a lot of it, it's just data mining. If it's surveys and they're utilizing the same staff that they have currently, whether it's an AMA or LVN in their clinics, that infrastructure is already there, unless they're proposing to go build out clinics throughout the state. So, because $7.5 million, I just want to see how that, and you got to tell me right now,
Okay.
we can talk offline.
Happy to discuss it.
All right, thank you.
I think the cost will be well justified.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Dr. Rice? Mr. Montgomery? None. Thank you very much, Dr. Lebeau. First, we will take up the award recommendations, and then we will vote on the 4 requests for applications.
Okay, can we go back to the
Yeah, and
slides,
we'll
Michael?
wait for the applications. As usual, I tend to go ahead of myself, and I did not take my Ritalin today, so please excuse me.
I think it's the last slide on this deck.
Please.
So we have 4 RFAs that we'll bring forward to you for consideration for cycle 2 of 2024. And the first is the Core Facility Support Award, and you're very familiar with this RFA. It supports applications that facilitate the development or improvement of core facilities that will provide valuable research services to support and enhance scientifically meritorious cancer research projects. The second is, well, just to backtrack and say, these awards are for a maximum of 5 years, and applicants may request up to a maximum of $3 million in total costs. The second is the High Impact, High Risk Research Award, which you are also familiar with. This has been a, I think, very productive award that has supported applications that explore the feasibility of high-risk projects that, if successful, would contribute major new insights into the etiology, diagnosis, treatment, or prevention of cancer. The goal here is to test novel hypotheses and to encourage investigators to develop preliminary results that can then be used to secure additional peer-reviewed grants to support a continuation of the work. And applicants can request up to $250,000 for a period of up to 24 months. The last 2 awards are, one is a new award. The second you are familiar with, but from some years in the past, and that is the Multi-Investigator Research Award. This award supports highly integrated programs of collaborative and cross-disciplinary research across multiple Texas investigators and often across institutions. And we emphasize the that applications responding to this RFA are who address program priorities of the academic research program and CPRIT's Oversight Committee are particularly encouraged. The next, well, the Multi-Investigator Award can request up to $4.5 million in total cost for a maximum of 4 years. The last award is a new award, and this is a Clinical Investigator Award, which would support mid-career clinical scientists who have specialty training relevant to the delivery of cancer care in oncology. And this would provide them with protected time to devote more time to augment their capabilities in clinical cancer research, and importantly, to provide mentoring to early stage investigators in the conduct of clinical research. This award would be for a total of $1.5 million in total cost for a maximum of 5 years. So that completes the slate of 4 RFAs presented to you for your approval for FY24 cycle 2.
Thank you. Are there any questions to?
Michael, can you go? Thank you. Okay.
All right. Are there any other further questions for Dr. Bow? I like the last acronym you put, CIA. Interesting, but
Yes.
we'll leave it at that. We will take up the award recommendations and then we will vote on the 4 requests for applications. Mr. Burgess has certified compliance for the academic research process. It is my understanding that there's no oversight committee members reporting any conflicts of interest. Are there any conflicts of interest not reported? Hearing none. Members, you have the list of applications and grant amounts recommended by the PIC for the academic research grant awards. We will approve the PIC's recommendation if 2/3 of the Oversight Committee members agree. There are 6 academic research award slates constituting 20 grant recommendations Rather than taking a separate vote on each grant mechanism, I will ask for a vote to approve all the slates. Should a member want to consider one or more recommendations separately, please make a motion to do so now. Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the PIC's recommendation for the following academic research grant award mechanisms. Texas Connect for Cancer Prevention Study Award, TREC Institutional Postdoctoral Training Award, TREC Major Instrumentation Award, TREC Pilot Study Award, recruitment of first-time tenure-track faculty members, and recruitment of established investigators.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing approval from at least 2/3 of the members, the motion carries. I will entertain a motion delegating contract negotiation authority to the CEO and CPRIT staff and to authorize the CEO to sign the contracts on behalf of CPRIT.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Members, closing out our action items for the academic research program, I will entertain a motion approving the proposed fiscal year 2024 RFAs as presented by Dr. LeBeau.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you, Dr. LeBeau. An extraordinary slate, I must say, just amazing, amazing. The chair recognizes Prevention Program Manager Carlton Allen to provide the Chief Prevention Officer's report and present the PIC's Prevention Award recommendation. Thank you, Mr. Allen.
Good morning.
Morning.
Prevention program update is up first, and it's behind tab 5 in your book. We'll talk about. Can you hear me now? Better? I need to get closer. Okay. We'll talk about cycle 23.2 later in the recommended awards. For cycle 24.1, the applications are due at the end of August. And we have currently just over 20 applications. And there's a quite pretty even spread between the two RFAs. And we're looking forward to reviewing those applications. For cycle 24.2 RFAs, we're looking at shifting that cycle slightly and having those RFAs posted September 7th with a deadline for December 14th, with awards being recommended to the Oversight Committee in May of 2024. If there are no questions about the updates, then I will move forward to present the recommended awards. The PIC recommended 9 projects for a total of $13,343,163 in across 4 different slates. All of these recommended awards have addressed one or more of the program priorities, and in this case, they address all 3 population-based priorities. The awards can be found on page 38 in your awards booklet. And the first slate is the cancer screening early detection slate, and there are 2 recommended projects for just under 3.5 million. And you can go to the next slide. The first is from Texas Tech University Health Science Center at El Paso, Dr. Jennifer Mulaku. This is the De Casa in Casa program, and it proposes to reduce the burden of cervical cancer in 61 counties in a 61 county service area by providing health education and navigation to women 21 to 65 years old who are overdue for their PAP screening, and also providing free screening and diagnostic services for underserved women. This program builds upon the original program to create more capacity for understaffed and under-resourced healthcare facilities through West and South Texas. And this project will also train providers and clinical staff and develop toolkits. The next project is from Texas Tech University Health Science Center, Dr. Teresa Bird. This project will provide colorectal cancer education, fit test screening, and colonoscopy services for people in Council of Government or COG Region 7, which is West Central Texas, for those who are uninsured and underinsured. There's 30 counties in Region 7 or COG Region 7 that will be served by fit tests and by colonoscopy services. And this program also plans to develop professional and lay training while also increasing the likelihood of colorectal cancer screening sustainability after funding. If it's all right with you, I'll go through the rest of the slates. All right. The next one is the next slate is the Colorectal Cancer Screening Coordinating Center. And as you may remember, this RFA was designed to establish a collaborative network of regional CPRIT funded colorectal cancer screening projects, patients, communities, clinicians, and health professionals. The center will build the infrastructure necessary for a coordinated statewide evidence-based colorectal cancer screening initiative. There's one recommended project for a total of $3 million. This is the University of Texas at Austin Dell Medical Center and Dr. Karan Shokar. This center is led by Dr. Shokar and Dr. Pione and Dr. Pione, who between them have 4 decades of experience as primary care physicians, public health scientists, and as national and international recognized experts and leaders in colorectal cancer screening. The goals of this project and the goals of the center are to create a comprehensive stakeholder network, to develop infrastructure and resources to support expansion of evidence-based CRC screening statewide, to utilize evaluation methods and innovative approaches for modeling, geospatial mapping, and cost effectiveness analysis. And lastly, to accelerate the creation, implementation, and dissemination of CRC screening best practices across the state. The next slate is the dissemination of CPRIT-funded cancer control interventions. These are successful projects that have been funded through CPRIT and are now developing toolkits and providing technical assistance in order to expand to other areas across the state. There are 3 recommended awards for just over $1.34 million. And the first is from MD Anderson Cancer Center, Dr. Lorraine Retzel. This project proposes to disseminate and implement the Taking Texas Tobacco-Free program by providing tobacco-free workplace, by providing policy and workflow guidance, specialized training and resources to opioid use centers, opioid use treatment centers. These centers are unique because they have a particularly high patient tobacco use rate. They have low staff numbers and have early business hours. And so this program will be providing hands-on technical assistance should the centers need that. The next project is again Dr. Lorraine Ratzel from the University of Houston, and this is taking tobacco, again, a dissemination project for Taking Texas Tobacco Free, providing free workplace policy guidance to denormalize tobacco use, education, and specialized training to care providers and resources to the LGBTQ+ centers. And they'll be using a step-by-step implementation and replication guide and toolkit with training materials, web-based and social media program promotion and hands-on technical assistance. The last project in the state is from MD Anderson Cancer Center and Dr. Karen Basin Inquist, and this is the dissemination of the Active Living After Cancer program. This program is to promote broader sustainable adoption and implementation of the Active Living After Cancer program, and it will be disseminated to community cancer centers in Texas, partnering with the Texas Society of Clinical Oncology. And an online implementation toolkit and online training and standardized Project Echo curriculum will be used to help implement that in these centers. And they'll also be using piloting a toolkit in these centers. The last slate is the primary prevention of cancer slate. And there's 3 recommended projects for just under $4.5 million. The first is from the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center, Dr. Karen Basin Inquist. And this program continues to implement their Active Living After Cancer program in medically underserved and rural areas, working in Houston, El Paso, Baymont, and Tyler. The program is used to increase physical activity and improve the physical functioning and quality of life of sedimentary cancer survivors, particularly those who are minority and medically underserved. And this program deals with issues important to cancer survivors, including fatigue, psychological distress, nutrition, and navigates participants to appropriate services. And they also use the Project Echo model. The next project is from the University of Texas Health Science Center at San Antonio, Dr. Allison Grimes. This project partners with 10 pediatric oncology centers across the state of Texas to provide HPV vaccination to childhood cancer survivors. The area that these 10 sites cover encompasses 225 counties in Texas, and the goal is to increase HPV vaccination rates among eligible childhood cancer survivors. And they'll be delivering an evidence-based HPV provider and staff continuing education program focused on unique risks and needs of childhood cancer survivors. And then lastly, from the University of Texas Medical Branch at Galveston, Dr. Abby Burnson. This program provides an increase in the HPV vaccination rate among low-income women living in 32 counties. The intervention addresses barriers to vaccine costs, lack of access and adequate information, lack of provider recommendations, and inadequate follow-up after the series is initiated by using patient navigators to educate patients and offering the vaccine at no cost while they're in the hospital and after delivery of the postpartum visit. Now I'll take any questions you guys have over those recommended awards.
Thank you, Dr. Rosen.
Yep, I did it.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's a good question, and I think that depends on firstly the recommended age for those individuals. So, you know, a lot of these cancer screenings have certain guidelines that these projects have to follow. But if someone were to say be able to, you know, be in the recommended age for most of those screenings and those programs had those services, then more than likely, yeah, the individual would be able to kind of navigate as many screenings as they were interested in. So yeah, there's a lot of programs. When we actually just had a recent visit to El Paso, I was able to sneak away for a little bit and see some of the patient navigators that were at work, and they were all working together across all the many programs that they have, which include cervical, breast, colorectal. So because all those patient navigators kind of work together, they're able to identify patients and kind of transfer them along the program so that they can get as many services as possible.
Thank you. And one other question is that I imagine a lot of the people coming into these programs have jobs during the week. Are the cancer screenings available during weekends?
Yeah, so there's oftentimes these programs will go to health fairs that typically happen on weekends to try to engage individuals that they're not engaging during the week. And then oftentimes we've seen programs have extended hours, and which may mean either opening up the services earlier or having them stay open later, so that individuals that have kind of those off schedule work hours can actually be screened.
Good questions? Hearing none, thank you, Mr. Allen. Turning to the Prevention Award recommendations, Mr. Burgess has certified compliance of the Prevention Award process. It is my understanding that no members have reported any conflicts of interest. Are there any conflicts of interest not reported? Seeing none. Members, you have the applications and grant amounts recommended by the PIC for the Prevention Grant Awards. The Oversight Committee will approve the PIC's recommendations if 2/3 of the members agree. We will consider the 4 slates together unless there's an Oversight Committee member who wishes to take up recommendations separately. Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the PIC's recommendations for the following mechanisms: cancer screening and early detection, colorectal cancer coordinating center, dissemination of CPRIT funded cancer control interventions, and primary prevention of cancer.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Hearing approval from at least 2/3 of the members, the motion carries. I will entertain a motion delegating contract negotiation authority to the CEO and CPRIT staff, and to authorize the CEO to sign the contracts on behalf of CPRIT.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Moving on to agenda item 9, Dr. Smith and Dr. McGee will provide the product development program update.
Good morning to the members here physically present, and good afternoon to those in far off lands. So good to be here today. Anyway, I'm here with Dr. McGee, who's the senior program manager for product development. And you guys probably know Bria better than you know me, so I feel like she should be introducing me, but it's the other way around. So she's going to give the report today. Thanks.
Good morning. Thank you. Next slide, please. So we opened our preliminary application portal for the FY 2024 cycle 1 with 4 RFAs. These are the same RFAs that we released last year. So therapeutic, seed, new technologies, and device and diagnostic. So we opened the portal May 1st through June 30th for about, well, exactly 9 weeks. And we received 79 preliminary applications. So this is the largest number of applications that we've received. So in 2012, the program had 3 cycles and 3 review cycles that year, and they received 78 full applications. And the next, I guess, largest number would be in 2020, when the program had 2 review cycles and received 68 full applications this year. So we're really excited about the interest in the program. So we also track the number of applications that are started in our preliminary application portal. So an additional 13 were actually started in the system, but not submitted. And I want to bring your attention to the last column on the right where we withdrew 34 applications without review. I'm going to explain that in a few slides. Next slide, please. So from those 79 total applications, the total request was $650 million. And as you can see, the breakdown, about 40% were seed preliminary applications and 43% therapeutic applications. From those applications that were received from May 1st to June 30th, they're reviewed on a rolling basis. So as they come in, they're reviewed. And during that time, we invited 19 preliminary applications to submit full applications. The full application submission deadline was August 1st, and that was stated in the RFA. And we mentioned that we would only be reviewing the first 15 full applications this cycle. Next slide, please. So we broke down the preliminary application data for the seeds. So as you saw on the previous slide, we invited 6 seed companies to submit full applications, and we received 32 preliminary applications in total. And this is a breakdown. So more than half of those 32 preliminary applications received were therapeutic applications. Next slide, please. So last year was the first year that we started the preliminary application process. So I wanted you to see a comparison of this cycle versus last cycle. So last cycle, the portal was actually open longer and we received 60 preliminary applications. This year, the portal was open 9 weeks and we received 79 preliminary applications. And as you can see, also this go round, we invited less applications to submit full applications. So there were a total of 19 invites sent out. And so this is where I'm going to discuss the 34 applications, that preliminary applications that were withdrawn without review. So we stated in our RFAs that we would accept the first 15 full applications by the August 1st deadline. Well, by June 30th, the deadline for the preliminary application, we received 16 full applications. So that was a whole month in advance of the full application deadline. We made a decision then to close the full application portal along with the preliminary application portal that was already set to close. And Dr. Smith made the decision that we would review all 16 of the full applications that were received. Of those 16 applications, 4 were deferred from the last cycle when we ran into closing the portal, but 4 had submitted. So 4 were deferred and the other 12 were from this current cycle. So there will be no deferrals for our next cycle. All 16 applications will go into review. The 4 that were deferred from last cycle are currently, the review process for those applications started last week. So they're currently in review. And the other 12 will be reviewed in early September. Next slide, please. So typically This slide would show you the number of full applications that were received and the number that we were going to actually review. Well, since that number is the same, slide columns 1 and 2 are duplicates of column 3 and 4. So these are the 16 full applications that we received by June 30th that, you know, that were invited of the 19. And the total ask is almost more than double of the amount of money that we have allotted. So since we closed the application portal on June 30th, there were about 34 applications that hadn't been, preliminary applications that hadn't been reviewed. So we made the decision to withdraw them without review so that the resubmission policy wouldn't count against them, so that they could resubmit without having it count against them in our policy. Next slide, please. So this is the cycle timeline. As I mentioned, those 4 applications deferred from cycle 2023. They, the review process started for them last week, early September for those other 12. And the final PDRC ranking meeting would be at the end of October with the pick and award recommendations being made sometime in February. We plan to also negotiate the budgets for these applications that are recommended. So that's why you won't have the recommendations at the November meeting. Next slide, please. So before Dr. Smith and I arrived at CPRIT, Kristen and Wayne wanted a resource guide for CPRIT. We have a lot of companies that come to us and say, you know, I want to move to Texas. I don't care if I don't get a CPRIT award, I still want to be in Texas. And they have their reasons. You know, my son just moved there, or I don't want to pay state taxes. And so they're like, well, you know, can you connect me with someone at this institution? Can you connect me with someone who could do manufacturing? And we have all this information, but it wasn't in one centralized location. So the team has come together with our contract program specialists, and we've put together a list of 120 entities. And these include categories of capital, so venture capital, angel funds, contract organizations, as well as our CPRIT funded core facilities at the universities. And, you know, once we got started on the project, Dr. Smith and I spoke, and he said, well, I don't want this to be a phone book. He was like, I don't want people to just be able to look through and see a name and a phone number. So we devised a list of questions that we sent out to the companies, and we asked them to answer, you know, give us something that this company, you know, can help a CPRIT funded company with that we couldn't find on your website. Tell us if you've worked with any CPRIT funded companies. And if you have, do you mind listing those so that, you know, our applicants and those interested in contacting you can see. And the response has been a little over 50 companies. So we're going to have 120 companies listed with over 50, including contact information for someone that'll be strictly for CPRIT funded companies or CPRIT applicants, and then information on, you know, what these companies can do for applicants and CPRIT funded companies. And so this will be released for our October conference online. And we're considering, I would say, version controlling. So releasing this first version, and then hopefully more companies will come to us and say that they're interested in participating. And right now, as of right now, it's strictly Texas-based companies. Next slide. I think that's the end. That's it.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Drs. Smith and McGee?
I just have a comment on that
Please.
resource.
Mhm.
It's really impressive. I know we talked about this before in other meetings, but you should also consider other resources, including counties, economic development corporations, also cities that would be interested in having some of these entities help. You know, they want to help your customers come to Texas or expand. So I don't know how you would do that, but you should consider that's also a tool available to your customers.
Thank you. So we reached out to like places like THBI and then some of the economic development offices in San Antonio that work with their Velocity Texas organization. So we do have some of those listed, but not all of them. So we will consider adding additional economic development resources.
Great.
Just Bria, excellent presentation. Thank you. Just two real quick questions. On the resource guide, is this a physical thing like this, or will this be online and constantly updated?
So it's going to be, we originally considered in print and online, but I think to version control, we're going to strictly have it online. So there'll be a QR code that you can scan to download it, and then you'll be receiving the most up-to-date version.
Good, thank you. And the other one is, how long does it take now when a company sends in a preliminary request to the time they hear no or send in a full request? Is that 2 weeks, 3 weeks?
It's between 3 and 5 weeks. On average, we've gotten as short as 3 weeks, and then some it may take, like if we get 20 applications in 1 week, then we have to kind of split them up. So that may take 5 weeks. So the latest application received, I think like around the middle of May, those were the last ones to submit, like to be able to submit a full application by June 30th, beating the August 1st deadline by a month.
So about 4 weeks.
Mhm.
All right, thank you. Very good.
Following on what Ambrosia said about the state and other agencies across, isn't Senator Nelson our Secretary of State right now, Wayne? Well, you know, she's been involved in some of these economic development. They just took a big group to Europe and all that. I would probably talk to her office. She knows CPRIT well. She was our biggest advocate. And find out about all the agencies that Ambrosia referred to that might have a interest in some of this investments and recruitment, because it is across the state. And I also was curious, are you all seeing more activity because of the decline in the Silicon Valley venture capital dollars? Is that probably spiking it as the Wall Street and Financial Times talk about?
Yeah, I think that that's certainly an issue. And it's an issue just not in oncology, but across the biotech sphere. In fact, I saw one article or someone was talking about with investments down 80% year over year. So, and most of the people I talk to don't see this getting any better, you know, in the short term, at least 18 to 24 months before we really see kind of a recovery.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you very much, Dr. McGee, for that presentation. You are much gentle than the juggernaut that Dr. Smith presents. Thank you very much. We're going to wait to take up agenda item 10 until later in the meeting. The chair recognizes Mr. Roberts to present his appointments to the Scientific Research and Prevention Program committees. Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, Dr. Patel. I'm of course proud of all three of our programs, but I am particularly thrilled with the advances that I think you can see that have been occurring with the product development program. So it's been a long road to hoe, but I think we're getting to the end of it. Excuse me. I appointed the 25 experts behind tab 8 to our peer review stable. Our statute requires you to approve these appointments. At their August 3rd meeting, the Board Governance Subcommittee reviewed the appointees to the Academic Research and Product Development Research Peer Review panels, and they recommend approval by the Oversight Committee. I request your approval.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Roberts or the Board Governance Subcommittee? Hearing none. Is there a motion to approve the CEO's 25 appointments to the Scientific Research and Prevention Program committees?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. Turning to agenda item 12, I recognize Mr. Roberts to present the presiding officer's new appointments to the Clinical Trials Advisory Committee and the Product Development Advisory Committee.
Also, At its August 3rd meeting, the Board Governance Subcommittee reviewed Dr. Patel's proposed appointments behind tab 9 to the Clinical Trials Advisory Committee and the Product Development Advisory Committee. The subcommittee recommends that the Oversight Committee approve the 4 appointments, and I request your approval.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve these 4 advisory committee appointments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Members, the next presentation will be from 2 of the Oversight Committee's advisory committees. From a time management perspective, we expect each presentation and question and answer period to take approximately 30 minutes. Dr. LeBeau, I understand you will be presenting some of the clinical trials advisory committee report. Yeah, Dr. LeBeau's. Maybe we can have a facsimile of Dr. LeBeau, which is impossible to have.
I think we can do it.
Yes, that's good. Oh, she's AI created.
I don't think she was expecting us to move out of order. And I'm not a reasonable facsimile thereof.
My apologies.
We'll digitally erase you, don't worry. Dr. LeBeau, I understand you will be presenting some of the clinical trial advisory committee's report because Dr. Eckert had a scheduling conflict. Please.
That is correct. So if we could move to the first slide. I'd like to begin by giving you a quick overview of the activities of the Clinical Trials Advisory Committee over the last year and move then rapidly to the most important component of our presentation, which is to hear from 2 of the grantees, Dr. William Kelly and Dr. David Gerber, who I will introduce in just a moment. If we move to the next slide. The Clinical Trials Advisory Committee has been very active this year and is really seeking to achieve, working on 3 goals this year. The first is diversification of membership. The second is to develop some new funding mechanisms and to enhance the existing mechanisms. And the third is to continue our discussion of mechanisms to engage rural populations. And this slide shows you our progress on the first goal of expanding membership. We have added 4 new members to the committee this year. The first is Dr. Ruma Bhagat, who is the Principal Science Leader for Global Health and Equity and Population Sciences at Genentech. And she brings expertise in engaging diverse communities in clinical research. The second is Dr. Suzanne Cole, who is providing a much needed bridge between academia and community oncology. She is a medical oncologist and serves as the PI of the Community Oncology Program at UT Southwestern Medical Center and the Simmons Comprehensive Cancer Center. Dr. David Gerber, who you will hear from in just a bit, is formerly was the Associate Director for Clinical Research at the Simmons Comprehensive Cancer Center at UT Southwestern, but is a leader in clinical cancer research. And Dr. Pavan Reddy is the new director for the Dan L. Duncan Comprehensive Cancer Center at Baylor College of Medicine, and brings in expertise in stem cell transplantation and clinical research. If we move to the next slide. We have also been working to engage our committee members and the external community in learning more and developing opportunities to engage the rural community in clinical research. And to that end, we've had two guest speakers, Dr. Pat LaRusso, who's at Yale University and has expertise in early clinical trials, is a national leader, and has developed a hybrid decentralization model that they've rolled out at Yale, which allows them to expand trials to community sites. We've also heard from Dr. Mohammed Beg, who was formerly at UT Southwestern and is now VP for Oncology for Science 37. And they have developed a platform for performing global clinical trials globally with a centralized digital platform. And he presented that to our group as well. Next slide, please. Just to give you a quick snapshot of the cumulative clinical research data for CPRIT-sponsored programs. We have supported 273 clinical trials with over 48,000 patients enrolled. You see the type of clinical trials shown here in the pie chart on the left, with interventional trials representing the majority of the trials. And on the right, you see the number of patients enrolled by type of trial, with about 12,000 enrolled in interventional trials and the remainder, 75% in observational trials. On the next slide, I'll just quickly summarize the CTAC recommendations to CPRIT, which we are continuing to develop. The first we have already briefly mentioned of continuing to refine the Clinical Trials Network Award RFA to ensure that we can diversify the spectrum of patients enrolled in clinical trials. We're also considering partnerships with NCI and the Cancer Therapy Evaluation Program, or CTEP, and have approached them and have embarked on discussions with them about developing new initiatives that can be launched in Texas. We are considering new RFAs, the first being the K24-like mechanism, and that it has been translated into the CIA award that you just approved earlier in this meeting, and Grand Challenge Awards, or Stand Up to Cancer Catalyst type awards, which are partnerships with industry. We are also considering a model where we may launch meetings with cancer center leaderships to discuss recruitment awards and new initiatives regarding clinical research. And I just want to say before moving on that we need to continue expanding our membership. Our committee feels that we've not completed our goal here. In particular, we think we have pretty good representation of the cancer centers and academic institutions, but we haven't not yet achieved appropriate representation in community oncology. So we need to cast a wide net and to get suggestions for names for individuals who might wish to participate in that role. So I would like to move on and introduce our two speakers. I'm really delighted to introduce our first speaker, Dr. William Kelly, who is joining us today in person. Dr. Kelly is an assistant professor at UT Health Science Center in San Antonio, and he is a medical oncologist and who specializes in neuro-oncology and thoracic oncology. And I wanted to encourage you to take a look at his bio, which we included in your materials, because it's a really beautiful story of how he became engaged in translational research, and how he outlines how during his oncology fellowship, he really was struck by the challenges and devastation caused to patients by malignancies in the central nervous system. And this spurred him to go on for additional training, but also to dedicate himself to the translation of basic science discoveries into novel therapeutics. He is an early clinical investigator supported by CPRIT, and is the PI on a number of clinical trials, I think a few of which he will speak to you about today. Yes.
Thank you so much. That was a lovely introduction. Really appreciate it. If I could just have the first slide. So first of all, let me just start by saying that I'm very honored to be here in front of this committee just to talk about some of the work that myself and others have been doing at Mays Cancer Center at UT San Antonio. So the cornerstone will be a talk about this phase 2 trial of sacituzumab in patients with glioblastoma. But I'm going to start with a little bit of career development just as a means of introduction. I have no disclosures. Next slide. So again, just as means of introduction, I am principal investigator on the phase 2 multi-center prospective study of sacituzumab govitecan in recurrent glioblastoma. I'll talk about that one a little bit later in the presentation, as well as another investigator-initiated study. This is of imipramine, which is an antidepressant in combination with lomustine in recurrent glioblastoma. The antidepressant, we have preclinical data that it makes the chemo work better. I'm also principal site investigator at Mays Cancer Center on 2 other studies. One is an immunotherapy trial looking at resectable non-small cell lung cancer. I also, as a neuro-oncologist, and a medical oncologist, I also focus on lung cancer with brain metastasis. And we also have a basket study looking at meningioma. I also am involved in basic science research. We're putting together a PDX model looking at LAG-3 and PD-1 blockade. We've secured drug and are awaiting the ICRIT protocol. Next slide. So just a little bit about recent peer review publications. We just had a paper published in Clinical Cancer Research in July. This was our phase 2 investigation of TVB 2640 with bevacizumab in patients with a first relapse of a high-grade astrocytoma, as well as other publications, including case reports on lymphadenopathy and immunotherapy, and a review paper in immune checkpoint inhibitors published in Clinical Translation Oncology. At the bottom is the Kaplan-Meiers of PFS and overall survival from that Clinical Cancer Research paper. So what we observed, to make a long story short, was a statistically significant improvement in progression-free survival at 6 months. So the progression-free survival we observed was 31% versus a historical control of anti-angiogenic therapy alone being 16%. So we were very happy about that. Have some manuscripts in progress. Hope to speak more about that in the future, and as well as recent abstract publications, presentations. Next slide. As far as academic performance, I'm halfway through my Master's of Science in Clinical Investigation and Translational Science. Again, I highlight this because it's all made possible by the funding provided by CPRIT and the support. And I also conduct weekly lab meetings with my mentor, Dr. Brenner. I participate in journal clubs, tumor boards, grand rounds, and various seminars. And I contribute to scientific review as a member of a Department of Defense peer review panel for brain tumors, a review editor for Frontiers in Oncology, and numerous other peer-reviewed papers in various immunology and cancer journals. Next slide. Also, as an academic professor, I do monthly didactic lectures and a couple lectures to the medical students each year on chemotherapy. I participate in the quality improvement project. We just had our nurse practitioner win first place for this at the association, the annual oncology symposium by the Association of PAs in Oncology. And I also participate as leader of our clinical trial disease group. Next slide. So as many here know, glioblastoma is the most common and aggressive primary brain tumor. The standard of care is surgery followed by radiation, concurrent and adjuvant chemotherapy, but still the overall survival remains disappointing at 14 months. There are no systemic therapies with proven survival benefit in the recurrent setting. So we're always looking for novel therapies. TROP2 is a transmembrane glycoprotein that participates in calcium signaling. It's highly expressed in glioma, 95%, but not in normal brain tissue. The expression in tumors correlates with the grade, proliferation rate, microvessel density, and worsened survival. Sacituzumab govitecan is an antibody drug conjugate that is FDA approved in metastatic urothelial cancer and metastatic triple negative breast cancer. It consists of an antibody targeting TROP2, as well as a pH-dependent linker and a active metabolite chemotherapy payload. It's SN38, which many know as the metabolite of irinotecan. So this work is based on a phase 0 study that we did at Mays Cancer Center. This was a window of opportunity trial of 10 patients with recurrent GBM and 11 patients with breast cancer. They all received a single dose of sacituzumab govitecan the day before surgery. They then went for elective craniotomy with intraoperative tumor and serum collection. They continued to receive sacituzumab on days 1 and 8 of a 21-day cycle. And among the first 14 patients, we observed 2 partial responses and a very favorable median tissue concentration of 176 nanomolar per gram. Next slide. As expected, TROP2 expression in this study correlated with the percent of SN38 tissue to serum ratio, and this indicates delivery of payload by the antibody. We also looked at gamma H2AX, which is a surrogate marker of DNA damage, and this did not correlate with the percent SN38 tissue serum ratio. We had been looking at this as another marker of direct delivery, but a lack of correlation could also be explained by prior alkylating therapy causing high levels of pre-existing DNA damage, or a failure of SN38 to sufficiently impact DNA in the 1-day interval between dosing and surgery. We also looked at CA9, which is a surrogate marker of intratumoral hypoxia, and we found that it did not correlate with hypoxia. So one of our theories was, is hypoxia causing early dissemination of the chemotherapy in the acidic tumor microenvironment? And the observation that we made suggests against that hypothesis, that hypoxia does not appreciably drive indirect SN38 release. Next slide. So based on this, we are now conducting a multi-center open label single arm therapeutic trial. It's being conducted at the Mays Cancer Center, Texas Oncology in Austin, and the Cleveland Clinic Cancer Center. It consists of giving sacituzumab govitecan at the approved safety dose of 10 mg per kg IV, days 1 and 8 of every 21 days. The hypothesis being that treatment with sacituzumab govitecan will improve PFS in patients with IDH wild type recurrent glioblastoma as compared with a historical control of lomustine. As part of this study, we utilize a 2-stage phase 2 Bayesian adaptive design. The initial phase consists of an assumption of progression-free survival at 6 months with unfavorable and favorable probabilities of 0.17 and 0.34 respectively. We calculate that the interim analysis needed to stop the trial for futility would be less than 2 responses. And based on this, that we would need 20 patients. Next slide. The study also consists of assessments for hypoxia via oxygen-enhanced MRI. This is done in collaboration with the University of Manchester, as well as a metabolic analysis, which is a collaborative effort we have with UT Austin. So basically, this is using ultra-high performance liquid chromatography and various other forms of mass spectrometry to get a comprehensive metabolic profiling of these tumors. Next slide. So where are we with the trial? We currently have 17 of 20 patients and should be bringing the study on hold in the next couple of weeks to perform the interim analysis. So very excited about that. Next slide. So I don't have a slide with their pictures, but I did want to give a thanks to my mentor, Dr. Andrew Brenner, our research scientist, Henriette Belinda, and the invaluable team at the clinical research team at the Mays Cancer Center, including Joe Meekins.
Thank you. Questions?
Dr. Gerber, very nice presentation. Your trial, is that, I want to make sure I understand, is that pre-surgery or after surgery?
So the phase 0 was a window of opportunity trial with surgery patients. This one is not. The phase 2 does not involve surgery.
Got it.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Yes, doctor. coming.
Thank you very much for that presentation. It's very exciting, inspiring work you're doing. I'm a medical oncologist in West Texas, and so I'm on the frontier treating patients every day. I can't say that name as many times as you did of this drug, so I'm going to have to use the trade name of Trodelvy. But we see a lot of side effects with this medicine. I've got several patients on it right now. What is y'all's take on dose reduction, and how are you handling that?
Absolutely. So, this actually came up in the writing of the clinical trial, because although the package insert, so neutropenia, specifically grade 3 neutropenia, is kind of like the principal concern. That's what was observed in the phase 1 and phase 2, and even the phase 3 ASCENT trial, as well as the Tuxedo trial. So the package insert does not include a recommendation for G-CSF as the initial treatment with the first cycle, but we actually included in this clinical trial the option for clinical investigators to use G-CSF either in cycle 1 or later if the patient develops neutropenia. And we felt that that was important because this is being tested in a different patient population, and brain tumor patients already are at a predisposition to have lymphopenia from their brain tumor, as well as the alkylating therapy that we use.
Very good. Thank you. And your latest trial that you have going, it's curious to me, the 3 sites that you're working with. I love that idea of academic centers and community centers working together. I'm just curious, how did that come together?
Yeah, so Dr. Cordova at the Cleveland Clinic Cancer Center, I actually trained with at the NIH, so I know her personally from that. And Dr. Brenner also has various connections at Texas Oncology in Austin. So we have a burgeoning network of clinical trialists.
That's fantastic. Thank you for your presentation. Again, I'd love to get some contact information for you to talk later. So thank you.
Absolutely. Love to talk more about it.
Thank you. Just 2 brief questions. As regards the progression-free survival that you mentioned at 6 months, does that also take into account quality of life?
So quality of life is very important for these patients. We, as a primary endpoint, just as a phase 2 study, haven't focused on that, but that's definitely an area for future research. The quality of life with sacituzumab, I think is, at least as we've observed, is good in comparison to some of the other drugs that we use treating this disease. It's a horrible disease, and unfortunately, the chemotherapy and anti-angiogenic options that we give can cause various side effects, not least of all cytopenias, and in the case of bevacizumab, blood clots.
And the second thing is that at the tumor blood-brain barrier interface, are there plans to increase the systemic drug and transportation into that vulnerable site, the target site?
Yes, so this is a topic that I love to talk about because it gets at the problem with preconceived notions. We all learned in medical school that the blood-brain barrier was this impermeable divide protecting the CNS space from what's around it. And what we've seen is that clinical trials don't really bear that out as much as we thought. We saw this first with trastuzumab, HER2-directed therapy in patients with breast cancer. We saw it again with PD-1 and CTLA-4 antibodies. So, whether they're acting, in the case of immunotherapy, you can always make the argument that it's acting peripherally on the lymphocytes, T lymphocytes. But what we've seen is that these drugs, through blood-brain barrier breakdown from tumor involvement of the microarchitecture or some other mechanism, there are areas of the brain such as the pituitary where the blood-brain barrier is not complete. They are getting in.
Just out of curiosity, you said this medication, I'm not familiar with, so forgive my ignorance.
Sacituzumab.
Yeah, It attacks a certain receptor, the TROP2 expression,
Yes.
which is not seen in normal tissues,
Not in normal brain tissue.
not normal brain, but
Yeah.
the rest of the body does.
It's expressed by a number of epithelial cancers. And when we look specifically in the brain, there isn't a high expression of TROP2.
Okay, but is it expressed in normal human tissue, the liver, bone marrow, muscles, anywhere else?
I'd have to get back to you on that one.
Because I was trying to figure out how you're getting side effects. If it's that specific, how is it that you're getting systemic side effects?
It does definitely, so it's not 100%. And that's kind of one of the things that we were looking at. So we were looking at carbonic anhydrase specifically as a surrogate measure of hypoxia, because we wanted to answer the question, is the payload dissociating from the antibody before it gets to the TROP2 expressing tumor?
Okay.
And so we saw a correlation between TROP2 expression and the SN38 tissue to serum ratio, but we did not see a correlation between the carbonic anhydrase and the SN38 tissue to serum ratio. So that suggests that hypoxia is not playing a heavy role in the delivery of SN38 to the tumor tissue.
How does this drug, okay, let me put it another way. How does this drug affect your bone marrow? Specifically, how does it affect those cells? Is it causing apoptosis? What is it doing to it? Why are they getting neutropenic?
So I don't know that we have a good answer, but it definitely does cause, as we said, the neutropenia. Whether that's TROP2 expression by neutrophils, I'd have to look into that, but I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Dr.
Thank you
County.
very much.
Really appreciate it.
Dr. Lobo.
So I'd like to introduce Dr. David Gerber, who will be joining us virtually today. Dr. Gerber is a professor in the Department of Internal Medicine in Hematology Oncology and the Peter O'Donnell Jr. School of Public Health at UT Southwestern Medical Center. He has had several roles within the Simmons Comprehensive Cancer Center. He was formerly the Associate Director for Clinical Research and Program Director for Experimental Therapeutics, but now he is the Director of the Office of Education and Training. He is a nationally renowned clinical researcher focusing on thoracic oncology, and he has a number of awards, but importantly, he received the NCI Director's Merit Award for his work in 2022 on expanding the role of advanced practice providers in NCI-sponsored clinical trials. He's also a recipient of CPRIT funding and serves as the PI of the Clinical Trials Network Award and a Clinical Trials Participation Program Award, and he is going to speak about his work in both of these areas today. Dr. Gerber, welcome.
Dr. LeBeau, thank you for the kind introduction and the opportunity to provide an update on our work. My apologies that I'm calling in from Dallas and was able to attend the meeting in person. I can't tell from my view whether the slides are up. Are they at this time? Okay.
Momentarily.
Okay, great. So what I'm going to be doing today is providing an update on two grants. One is a Clinical Trials Network Award, and one is a Clinical Trials Participation Award.
Slide 22 or 21. Thank you.
Great. Next slide. So as I think probably everyone in the room knows, what these efforts are trying to do is address a persistent challenge and disparities when it comes to cancer clinical trials. So if you look at the circle on the left, right, you're going to see a representation of a well-known statistic that at most 5% of US adults with cancer enroll in clinical trials. What exacerbates this issue is that when you look at those patients who do go on clinical trials, and that's the top circle on the right, only about 5% of them are underrepresented minorities. Whereas if you look at the circle on the bottom right, which are US adults with cancer in general, about 30% of them are underrepresented minorities. And there are many cancers for which underrepresented minorities are disproportionately represented, whether that's certain hematologic malignancies, whether that's prostate cancer. And we all know from work that the FDA has done over decades that up to about a third of therapeutic agents can have differing toxicity and efficacy according to the race and ethnicity of the recipients. And that's not true only for systemic therapies like oral and IV, but it's also true for topical agents. And so we're trying to address some of these disparities. Next slide. Unfortunately, over time, it has become more difficult to offer cancer clinical trials at many clinical sites. So this is data from our cancer center in Dallas, and our cancer center includes not only UT Southwestern, the academic university site, but also Parkland Health, which is the integrated safety net healthcare provider for Dallas County. And what you can see in the figure on the left is that over time, a declining proportion of trials that we opened in our cancer center could be opened at our safety net clinical site, Parkland. And at that safety net clinical site, 80% of the cancer patients are underrepresented minorities. The circle on the right shows a lot of information, but it's explaining that there are multiple reasons why we can't open trials there. The top third on the right, the light orange color, is basically the sponsor saying, no, we don't want to bother with opening at one of those sites, even though we explained to them that it's adjacent to our campus and that all of the cancer clinical care and cancer clinical trial activities are conducted by our academic faculty. Then you'll see in the kind of the bottom middle that it's just not feasible for a lot of these studies because they're becoming too complicated. So if a trial has triplicate EKGs that need to be performed every 6 hours, or frequent PK draws that require a patient to take up a chair for 14 hours of a day, when you have a healthcare system that's struggling to meet the routine cancer clinical care needs of its population, it's difficult to commit to those. And the fact is that trials are becoming more complicated over time. We used to only see PK in phase 1 trials, but now we're seeing it in some phase 2 trials as well. Next slide. So the Texas Clinical Trials Network offers sponsors access to diverse settings and populations. And the map on the right shows the metropolitan areas that are included. There are two main components, two grants within the Texas Clinical Trial Network. I lead the North Central Texas operation. So the lead institution is UT Southwestern in Dallas, and our affiliates are John Peter Smith in Fort Worth and Baylor Scott and White in Temple, Texas. And then there's a separate grant in Southeast Texas led by MD Anderson with affiliates Lyndon B. Johnson in Houston and UT Medical Branch in Galveston. 2 out of the 6 sites are safety net healthcare systems. And although we are 2 separate grants, as you'll see shortly, we're already working together on this effort. Next slide. So the network is designed to optimize the activation, conduct, and oversight of clinical trials. So with CPRIT support, we can enhance infrastructure and personnel to help sites' capabilities and overcome some sponsor concerns. We can perform critical review of protocols to match sites' populations and needs. Within our regions, we can have IRB reliance to expedite activation. We can share strategies to enhance awareness of and enrollment to activated trials. We have oversight and bi-directional education to support protocol management, data collection, and other trial activities. And we're already planning future growth into additional regions of Texas. What do I mean by bi-directional education? This isn't just me coming from the academic ivory tower, going into safety net other community sites, telling them how to do things. The fact is that some community sites are already better at some aspects of clinical trial implementation and activation and conduct than we may be, certainly when it comes to time to activation. Next slide. So we introduced this network to clinical trial sponsors in a May 2023 webinar just a couple months after receiving our award. We invited 67 total organizations. 27 of them attended. That was over 100 attendees. 24 of them were pharmaceutical companies, and 3 of them were contract research organizations. And it was a 90-minute session. About 15 minutes was presentations. And we actually just had to cut off the questions after 40 minutes of questions. There were so many. But the sponsors and the CROs were interested in what phase of trials we were looking for, how central IRBs might be used, whether we were interested in non-therapeutic trials, whether we would use shared contract templates, how we were going to expand to the non-covered regions of Texas, whether we thought we could handle hematologic malignancy trials, which tend to be more complex sometimes than solid tumors, just because those standard treatments are more complex, what our time to trial activation would be, whether we had specific tumor type expertise within individual network sites, how we were going to evaluate our measures and intervals, and what would the next steps be for interested sponsors. Well, since that time, 14 organizations have followed up with us, including 12 pharmaceutical companies and 2 CROs, and 7 trials were forwarded for possible activation. I will tell you that that's not yet a home run or even scoring a goal, because even at that time, sponsors still need to commit to actually opening at these sites. Next slide. So ultimately, I think successful enrollment to cancer clinical trials requires clinician and institutional interest and support, because clinical trials are embedded within clinical care. And the fact is that if there is an institution that's not currently doing cancer clinical trials, it can be quite a few steps to get to that point. And the fact is that we all know that providing standard cancer clinical care now is such a complex and time-consuming task that it's no longer good enough just to ask clinicians to do this out of the goodness of their heart because they think it's the right thing to do. So this is information that I share with our medical oncology trainees here at UT Southwestern as to why I think it benefits them to enroll patients on trials. They learn certain skills like formal measurements of tumors and assessments of toxicities. They can have opportunities to be authors. They have opportunities to participate in related research like secondary data analyses and correlative studies. This experience can be valued for multiple future research paths, private practice, academics, industry, and regulatory, and they can gain experience with new and experimental therapies. But when you're going into a new site altogether, it's not just educating the clinicians about these opportunities, but it's educating the institution as well. Next slide. I'm going to quickly turn to the second program and put it in context by explaining that, as I mentioned before, cancer clinical trials add to the substantial burden of standard cancer therapy. This is research that we published 6 years ago, showing that over time, there's not only an increase in the eligibility criteria for cancer clinical trials, but there's an increase in the number of screening procedures that people have to do to even be considered to be enrolled and start treatment. And that increase in procedures doesn't stop once patients are enrolled to the trial. Next slide. So the Clinical Trials Participation Award, to remind you, provides reimbursement of out-of-pocket costs associated with the more frequent and possibly more distant travel required for patients on clinical trials. And this reimburses expenses for individuals whose income is up to 700% the federal poverty rate. This table from one of our recent publications on the project is now already out of date, but if you're a household of 4, 700% the federal poverty rate is over $200,000. This is not just the Medicaid population. This is not considered inducement or coercion. This has been reviewed by the Texas Health and Safety Code, and it's part of state legislature, and it's based on US FDA recommendations going back 5 years. What can we reimburse? Travel, lodging, food, maybe childcare, and it all depends on the documentation. If it's your sister-in-law coming to your house to watch the kids, we're just not able to reimburse that because we don't have adequate documentation. But if it's drop-off at a professional childcare facility that can provide a receipt, absolutely. What about telehealth encounters? If someone needs assistance with broadband internet support, we can do that as well. Next slide. So we've been enrolling patients and providing reimbursements for 1 year. And in the top slide, you'll see in the orange bars, the number of referrals per month. And in the blue, you'll see the number of enrolled per month. And sometimes there can be quite a fair amount of discrepancy. Now, that may be just because the enrollment process lags behind the referral by a few days, but also there may be patients referred who ultimately decide not to participate or don't qualify. We have reimbursed within the first year about $50,000, and that was 134 individual reimbursements. And now that we've really gained momentum, we expect the second year to be substantially higher than that. Next slide. So demographic differences between referred and enrolled patients reveal potential process improvements. So take a look at the figure on the left. These are the breakdown by race and ethnicity of the referred patients. And on the right are the enrolled patients. Now, there are a lot of reasons why referred patients may not go into the program. They may not qualify for the reimbursement program, or even more commonly, they're being planned for a clinical trial and they wind up not going on a trial because they don't qualify for the trial. But take a look on the left, you'll see that among referred patients, 20% are Hispanic or Latino, and among enrolled patients, double are that proportion. But one of the things that we were doing at the very beginning was for non-English speaking individuals, we were helping them with the individual steps of enrolling in the program and filling out the paperwork. We weren't doing that for other populations. And we have since started doing that. And that has tremendously increased, for example, the proportion of African Americans referred who are enrolling in the program. Next slide. So there are multiple reasons for referred patients not being enrolled in the financial reimbursement program. So complicated figures, but on the left, what you're going to see here is that about half of patients, when we look at this process here, there are quite a few patients who are still in process, meaning we're trying to reach them, we're pending documentation, the referral's been submitted, or we just can't contact them. And on the right, you're going to see the proportion that declined to participate or were found to be ineligible. So among those declining or found to be ineligible, you'll see that broken down on the right. So most commonly, people state that they have no need for it, or they may self-disqualify themselves for income. They may screen fail for the clinical trial, and if they don't go on a clinical trial, they're not eligible for reimbursement, for example. So lots of moving parts here. I think that what we're finding is that when we introduce the concept of this reimbursement program to patients when we're first mentioning clinical trials, it makes it a little bit less foreign for them. Because imagine being a patient with a newly diagnosed cancer. You're hearing that you have cancer. You're hearing about the stage, the prognosis. You're hearing about cancer treatment for the very first time. Now you may be hearing about clinical trials for the first time. And on top of that, we're going to add a program about financial reimbursement. This is a lot of information for patients to receive. And what we're trying to learn is the art of doing this in a way where we can help patients without overwhelming them. Next slide. So in conclusion, these programs are designed to make clinical trials more accessible, equitable, and generalizable. The Texas Clinical Trials Network will make cancer clinical trials more accessible to the 30 million diverse residents of Texas. Our future growth right now is planned toward the Panhandle and West Texas. And although we're only just now preparing to go into the second year of our Clinical Trial Network Award, we're already planning that expansion. We're working to understand the needs of patients, clinical sites, and study sponsors, because that's critical to trial selection and program success. We feel that assisting patients with out-of-pocket expenses may overcome barriers to clinical trial enrollment and retention. And evaluation of both programs is ongoing. Even though both of these programs are within their first year of funding, we've already successfully published on them and plan to continue to do so throughout the duration of the awards, so we can show that we in Texas are leading the nation in thinking about out-of-box approaches to improving the reach and generalizability of cancer clinical trials. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Gerber. Questions? I was thinking, Dr. Gerber, that You mentioned a particularly horrendous word called paperwork. And more often than not, I saw that 17% in one of your pie graphs was because of documentation, the enrollment. And what is being done to assist people who are not well versed with having these documentations, let alone filling the documents?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So here, what we're talking about specifically is the documentation required to apply for the financial reimbursement program that we have. And for this financial reimbursement program, we're partnering with the Lazarus Cancer Foundation, which is based in California, and in other states has been working with sites to provide reimbursement for patients on cancer clinical trials. It was actually the Lazarus program that the CPRIT RFA was modeled on to some extent. Lazarus has really, I think, gotten this down to a science. It's a single page application form. It does require proof of income. If someone cannot provide proof of income, there are still ways to do it. That single page documentation, that single page form is something that we're now just routinely doing with the patients. So when the navigator for the program starts speaking with the patient and mentioning, well, if you do wind up going on, if you do go on this clinical trial, we've got this program that can support you. I can help you apply for this program. The person no longer sends them, a PDF to fill out, for example, or mails them something or has them take home a form. They just offer to fill it out themselves. Now, there may be some individuals who want as few people as possible to know what their income is, for example, and they may prefer to do that on their own. The same is true once someone's enrolled in a program with submitting the documentation for reimbursement. In general, the program operates on monthly reimbursement with patients submitting receipts. But if a patient requires reimbursement more frequently than once a month, that can be done. Submitting receipts does require collecting the receipts. That's not something, obviously, that we can do for patients, but our navigators will submit the receipts for the patients if they prefer that. Say they come in for a clinical trial visit and they can hand the receipts to that individual and they'll take care of it for them.
And what's the turnaround time as regards submission to payment?
That is a great question. I thought you were going to ask the turnaround time from submitting enrollment information to being deemed eligible, which I know is about 2 business days. I'm going to have to get back to you on the reimbursement timeline. That is a wonderful question, and it's not right that I don't have that answer for sure. I believe that it's days, but I need to double check that.
Thank you. Any further questions? Dr. Gerber, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Wonderful presentation. Dr. LeBeau?
Thank you. We will now move to the annual presentation from the Geographic Diversity Advisory Committee. And I'm very pleased to introduce Dr. Sarah Williams-Blangero. Dr. Williams-Blangero is a very highly accomplished genetic epidemiologist who has held a number of leadership roles. In 2014, she moved to the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley to become the founding director of the South Texas Diabetes and Obesity Institute. And in 2017 was appointed the chair of the Department of Human Genetics at UTRGV School of Medicine. Her research has focused on the genetic determinants of risk for complex diseases in minority populations, including the Jarrell ethnic group of Nepal and Mexican Americans. And I want to personally thank Dr. Williams-Blangero for her leadership of this committee because it was their inspiration and guidance that has helped us to develop the new TREC RFAs that you saw us present to you earlier today. Dr. Williams-Blangero. Thank you.
Okay. The Geographic Diversity Advisory Committee advises the Oversight Committee and CPRIT staff on the university's special needs and challenges in developing cancer research capacity in locations that are far away from the cancer research centers in the major metropolitan areas. The members of the committee represent universities that are located 100 miles or more from a National Cancer Institute designated center in Houston, Dallas, or San Antonio. The committee was formed in the summer of 2021, so we are in our second year. Over the past year, we've met 5 times to develop recommendations. The members of our committee include Joseph Heppert from Texas Tech University, Min Kang from Texas Tech University Health Science Center, Robert Kirkin from the University of Texas, El Paso, Raj Lakshmanaswamy from Texas Tech University Health Science Center in El Paso, Ken Ramos from Texas A&M University, Daniel Romo from Baylor University, and myself from the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. The Texas Regional Excellence in Cancer Award is a funding mechanism that is targeted to those institutions. And in February of this year, the second set of TREC awards were made. These awards went to Texas A&M University System Health Science Center for a program focused on gene environment and lifestyle interactions in cancer, and that is led by Dr. Ken Ramos. Texas Tech University Health Science Center at El Paso has a program entitled Impacting Cancer Outcomes in Hispanics, and that's led by Dr. Raj Lakshmanaswamy. And then we at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley received support for the South Texas Center of Excellence in Cancer Research, which is led by Dr. Subhash Chauhan. TREC eligible institutions are impacting cancer in Texas in several ways. They are addressing cancer health disparities, conducting research with populations that are underserved, and increasing the diversity and size of the scientific workforce devoted to cancer research. TREC eligible institutions tend to be resource limited institutions where CPRIT funding will have a transformational rather than incremental impact on cancer research programs. And so we now have 5 TREC programs that are active: Texas Tech Health Science Center, University of Texas at El Paso, Texas A&M University, Texas Tech University Health Science Center at El Paso, and the University of Texas at Rio Grande Valley. The Geographic Diversity Committee does advise and help address special needs and challenges in developing cancer research capacity at locations far away from the cancer research centers in Dallas, San Antonio, Houston. So how can we assure the sustainability of these TREC programs? TREC awards can be renewed once. The TREC award supported resources are important to allow leveraging to generate additional major funding from the National Institutes of Health and other biomedical research funding agencies. Additionally, TREC-related funding programs at CPRIT will foster career development and support the acquisition of major instrumentation that then also can be leveraged for additional funding. We were really excited to see the TREC Pilot Study Award launch. Pilot study funding for high-risk, high-reward projects is very limited at TREC eligible institutions. That funding can be used to generate preliminary data or develop technical approaches that will support applications for major research funding. So there's a huge return on these types of awards. And the committee does anticipate that in the long term, the return on these pilot study awards will be high and very important for diminishing cancer in Texas. The pilot program, as I said, was launched with applications due on April 18th. It provides a good amount of money to support pilot research, $200,000 for up to 2 years to explore feasibility of cancer research projects. The review of applications started in June, and we were pleased to see the 5 awards that were made today. Also, the postdoctoral training program was awarded today. Postdoctoral training is another area where CPRIT can have a transformational impact at TREC eligible institutions. Postdoctoral scientists, when they come in, contribute critical expertise to a lab and also novel ideas to cancer research programs. The outstanding postdoctoral scientists can then be retained in faculty, thereby enhancing the workforce at TREC eligible institutions. And we saw that one of those programs was awarded today. It was made first available in April. The funding associated with that is $850,000 over 3 years. And again, a big impact award. And here, the major instrumentation award is to enhance research capacity and addressing a common need at a TREC eligible institution. The major instrumentation grant mechanism was also launched this year and provides up to $1 million over 2 years to support the purchase of major equipment that will support multiple cancer investigators. CPRIT now has 4 programs supporting the transformation of cancer research at TREC eligible institutions. Additional programs that we have recommended to CPRIT are to have a TREC annual meeting award that would support bringing investigators from TREC eligible institutions together, a TREC clinical trial infrastructure award, and a TREC individual meeting award. This year, CPRIT has made a very major investment in TREC eligible institutions through the implementation of 3 new TREC awards and the launch of 3 new funding mechanisms. These programs support both junior and senior investigators whose research is focused on cancer, and maintaining a portfolio of funding mechanisms that are targeted towards TREC eligible institutions will increase the competitiveness of TREC eligible institutions for other funding agencies while simultaneously advancing cancer research, particularly on underserved populations. A key goal of the Geographic Diversity Advisory Committee for this year was to leverage CPRIT investment across the different TREC eligible institutions by fostering collaborations and promoting resources and opportunities available at each of the institutions. To help improve this leveraging, the committee will initiate a biannual virtual retreat this year to bring TREC investigators from across the 5 funded TRECs together to discuss opportunities for collaboration, resources available to support collaborative research, and priorities for action by the Geographic Diversity Advisory Committee. Our goals for 2023-2024 then are to promote the exciting cancer research done at TREC eligible institutions by sharing press releases and announcement with CPRIT staff, to develop a web page at each of the universities where we have TRECs that will describe TREC resources and support sharing of information, and to launch the biannual TREC virtual retreat. again, with the goal of fostering collaboration and sharing resources. So I'd be happy to answer any questions at this point.
Thank you very much. Questions?
I just have a comment. Thank you, Doc, for presenting this information. It's great to see these 5 institutions finally getting some resources. And I want to thank Wayne and of course all the staff, and Michelle, of course, everybody who's helped us get this done. And it's a start. It's a very good start. I like your recommendations. I, for one, see that it's clearly benefiting those regions and the entire state of Texas. But some of the recommendations that I would advise you to put on is, you have great TREC awards now. You just, in one way, another way of looking at it, you just increase the ceiling. You know, they're limited. If you look at when we recruit a scientist to the big medical center area, sometimes we give $7, $8, $9 million. That's a big impact for those communities. But for these 5 other communities, that kind of monetary investment goes a long way. So from our side, I think, at least for me, I'd like to see you go in that direction as well, increase the ceiling, because this committees work very hard to create those grants to be sure you guys utilize them and be applying. Also, the leveraging is already occurring. UTRGV Medical School, I know, that is launching an endeavor to invest over $100 million in research facilities and in that area. And they should be announcing that in the spring, but it's all because of what they see happening with CPRIT investing finally in the regions. So they're stepping up to the plate as well. So I'm very happy to see like that collaboration occurring. So keep up the great work.
Thank you, Dr. Lingera. Appreciate your presentation, and you have a particularly difficult task given the size and geographic diversity of Texas in itself. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dr. Patel, if I could make one comment, please, for Dr. LeBeau. I didn't want to interrupt your presentation earlier as we were going through this, but I do want to make a comment for the record regarding the Clinical Trial Advisory Committee and how the membership is formed. As the role of that body to start continuing the process of innovation of ideas and thinking outside the box, I want to make sure that we are hearing the perspective of all stakeholders and individuals that are affected by geographic challenges and non-urban treatment of cancer. And the entire list that you've presented today are people in urban settings and academic settings. And you mentioned that the committee had felt that there needed to be some additional diversification. I brought this up last year and we didn't get the follow-up that maybe we should have, but I think that you've got people on this board that have ideas and have contacts, and we need to do that. In addition to that, the ivory tower is not where the majority of this work is happening. For example, I saw 42 patients frontline cancer work yesterday before I got on a plane and flew here. I'm going to see 45 patients tomorrow. There is a lot of work going on in the communities of Texas that are not urban areas. And that includes nurse navigators, social workers, providers, and patients who struggle to get access to clinical trials. Many of the things we've heard today are great. They're a great way to start moving the needle. But I think we've got to get these people's perspective and involvement somehow, whether if it's an ad hoc or a subcommittee of the Clinical Trials Committee. These people have experience that I think is valuable, and I want them heard.
Thank you, Dr. Cummings.
Thank you very much, Dr. LeBeau. Any other comments, thoughts, ideas? I quite agree with Dr. Cummings' comments. The way I look at it is CPRIT building the initial foundation, and that foundation was the 3 pillars that we have. And once you have that developed reasonably well, which it is now, Now it's time to think about broadening and going out into the communities who voted to give us these funds. And it makes rational sense to do so, to at least think about it now and then subsequently put it in action or operationalize it. Thank you for those comments.
To that end, Dr. Patel, any recommendations, suggestions on who to put on those committees, we would love to get. We're going to need help identifying individuals to do that. And it's that simple.
It's also as simple as going to the local medical boards and asking those boards to nominate reasonable people to do so, rather than just having in a very, it would be very uncoordinated if I make the suggestions and Dr. Cumming makes the suggestion. It has to be a more statewide coordinated effort rather than not get and identify the right people. It will require that. The chair recognizes Mr. Roberts for presentation of the fiscal year 2024 honor area policy. Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, Dr. Patel. Our statute, as you know, requires me, with your approval, to adopt a policy for honoraria paid for our peer review services. The proposal for FY 2024 honoraria are recommended at the FY 2023 level that you approved last August. I request your approval. The material is behind tab 10. And again, this is unchanged from what's in existence today.
Any questions for Mr. Roberts? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the fiscal year 2024 honoraria policy?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. The chair recognizes Mr. Roberts to present the Health and Safety Code section 102.1062 waivers for fiscal year 2024.
Thank you, sir. We have two, both are identical to ones that you passed last year. The first is for Donald Brandy, contract specialist and hub coordinator, pursuant to the law that you just cited. And the memo behind the tab provides the full detail. Just for reference, this one's kind of interesting. Don referees tennis matches at the University of Texas at Austin. So we don't see that as a dangerous conflict.
Is that a conflict?
The second one is the complex one, again, that you've approved previously for review council members. Unlike the other Don Brandy's that you've approved previously, this one does not grant the waiver for a specific conflict of interest or person. Instead, we invoke this waiver when necessary to address the unusual scenario when a review council member has a conflict with a grant application that is part of the larger group of proposals that the review panel or review council must act upon. This waiver is necessary for a review council member to participate in the overall discussion and vote on the slate of award recommendations. Again, the information is provided behind tab 11, and I request your approval.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the two proposed Health and Safety Code section 102.1062 waivers for fiscal year 2024?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. The chair now recognizes Ms. Eckel to discuss the proposed administrative rule changes. Ms. Eckel?
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The rule amendments are located behind tab 12. of your meeting books. We have both rules for final adoption as well as a new proposed rule amendment. I'll start with the final order. This is related to the amendments that you reviewed at the May Oversight Committee meeting in chapter 701 and 703. We published those in the Texas Register back in June for public comment, which we did not receive any. These are the rule changes related to the definition and use of scope of work. So the next steps would be to file or send the final order to the Secretary of State with your approval. And unless there are any questions, I will move on to the new proposed rule amendment, which is 701.25. And this is related to CPRIT's electronic signature policy. The proposed change would explicitly expand it to CPRIT grant applicants who are submitting applications through CPRIT's electronic application receipt system. So with your approval, we'll send those to the Texas Register to start the process with publishing in Texas Register for public comment, as well as updating our website. And that is it for the proposed rules. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Eckel? Hearing none. Members, is there a motion to approve the final orders adopting the rule changes to the Texas Administrative Code Chapters 701 and 703, and to approve the publication of the proposed changes to Chapter 701 in the Texas Register?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Sorry? No, thank you. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Eckel. Turning to agenda item 16, the chair recognizes Ms. McConnell to present the Chief Operating Officer's report. Ms. McConnell.
Good morning. So my report is under tab 13, and I'll just highlight some of the agency's finances through the first 3 quarters of the fiscal year. We expended or encumbered 63% of the indirect administration budget and 95% of the 63% of the indirect administration budget and 95% of the direct administration budget through the end of May. That's approximately where we wanted to be, 2/3 or 3 quarters through the year. We also received approximately $20,000 in revenue sharing payments during that period. In April, TPFA issued another $79 million in commercial paper notes on CPRIT's behalf, and bringing the total issued to $224.5 million. By the end of this fiscal year, $298.3 million will be issued, and this is $1.7 million shy of our constitutional cap of $300 million. As you can see on page 13.9 on our CP and GO bond issuance summary, the interest rate actually ticked up to 5.10% in April from 3.15% in September of 2022. So those interest rates have been going up, and it's become more expensive than it had been for the state to issue debt over the past 15 years. But the interest rates are still under the historic averages that TPFA uses when running projections of the cost of state debt. The averages used have varied from 5.5% through FY 2021 up to 7.5% for FY 2022 and beyond. Before I move on, are there any questions on our finances? Yes.
Heidi, what was our lowest rate we've had for our bonds?
I think this goes back to like 2010, 2011. I think commercial paper was like 0.3%. So it was very, very low. Yeah. So Just to update you on the CPRIT Innovation 6 conference, scheduled for October 2nd and 3rd. Conference registrations are still hovering around 400. I think last night when I checked, it was 410. So, and 55% of the registrations are coming from CPRIT grantees. Reminders about conference registration went out at the beginning of July and the end of July, emphasizing the increase in prices that went into effect on August 1st. And on August 9th, an announcement about the speaker lineup was sent out to the CPRIT listservs, and more of these announcements about the speakers will be going out in the next few weeks to generate additional interest. And since I wrote my report a couple of weeks ago, we've confirmed an additional exhibitor in addition to the 7 listed there, because one of those, Scorpius Biomanufacturing, is a sponsor. They're our day one lunch sponsor, but the additional exhibitor is Protein Simple, also known as Biotechne. And they sell lab equipment and reagents. And so actually the majority of our exhibitors are companies that sell products used in research. The exception is the Greater Houston Partnership, which is where obviously a lot of our research and product development and prevention work is also being done.
Is this
I'll try again. Okay, there we go. Heidi, what were we expecting as far as the exhibitors? And second part is, were we expecting only companies, not institutions?
That's a good question. So we were expecting companies or organizations that may be interested in what we're doing. We were not expecting institutions, because actually by law, if they give CPRIT money, they cannot receive grants.
But is an exhibitor actually paying a fee to be an exhibitor?
Yes.
I see. So we're not just, I understand. Thank you.
Could you say it again? So if you're an academic institution receiving money, you can't sponsor this conference?
Correct.
Does that apply to the private companies, the nonprofits also?
Yes.
So any recipient, in other words?
Any recipient or any future recipient. If you want to apply for a grant in the future, you cannot give CPRIT money or you will be prohibited from receiving the grant.
Right. Thank you.
Are people who receive, are researchers who receive CPRIT grants, are they required to attend the meeting?
They're not required, but they're strongly encouraged. And the programs have sent out those messages to all of the CPRIT grant recipients.
Thank you. There are no further questions. Moving on to the next agenda item. Ms. McConnell, will you explain the recommended contract approvals, please? Thank you.
Thank you. So under tab 14 is my memo about the 3 approvals. One is for a new contract, and this is, while it's a new contract for economic assessment of the cost of cancer in Texas for FY24, it is with an existing company, a vendor that we've used, the Perriman Group, and it will be for $195,000. We did perform a competitive solicitation over the summer, and that resulted in the award to the Perriman Group. In addition, we have 2 contract renewals for FY24 that we need your approval on. One is with Allen Boyd's Consultants, and they perform the due diligence reviews of product development research grant applications, and that contract would be for $330,000. And the other one is with Business and Financial Management Solutions, or BFS, who monitor all of our peer review meetings, and that contract would be for $121,409. Are there any questions?
When was the last, wasn't there a previous Perryman grant?
Yes, contract. Yes, yes. They have actually been the vendor that has provided those services since 2010.
And when was the last Perryman report?
Last year.
Yeah, last year.
So
We get it
it's an annual report?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. There are no further questions. Members, there is a motion to approve contracts with the Perryman Group, Allen Boyd's Consultants, and BFS.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 19, subcommittee business. The subcommittee assignments for fiscal years 2024 and 25. Members, you have the proposed subcommittee assignments behind tab 16. I've noted the member that will chair the subcommittees with a red X. It's not a target sign. Are there any questions? Hearing none. Members, there is a motion to approve the new subcommittee assignments for fiscal year 2024-25.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. There's a certain degree of hypoglycemia here. Motion carries.
Dr. Patel, if I could make a comment.
Please.
You know, the times of these, that these subcommittees meet are at the subcommittee's discretion. And we find these meetings to be very valuable in vetting the issues that come before the full Oversight Committee. So we really like to see attendance as close to 100% as we can get. So to that end, if the subcommittee you have been assigned to, it would be easier for you to attend at a different time if you could let us know, and the chairman of it, because the CPRIT staff will be more than happy to accommodate whatever time y'all choose. So just think about it.
Just a quick question. I know we've talked about it among ourselves, but our board still has 8 members. How do we get to a full board number of 9?
All 3 of the statutory appointing officers need to make their 3 appointments. No, it is not my job to round them up. I have, let me make that clear.
Good luck.
But to that end, I do alert the appointing officers when members' terms expire and for possible reappointment. And I have reported at least the existing vacancy on a number of occasions to the appointing officer staff and have provided recommendations for the Oversight Committee, and they've not been acted on.
Thank you. No, wait. Members, is there a motion to approve the new subcommittee assignments for fiscal year 2024 and 25? Yeah, has so moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. We will now move to officer elections under agenda item 12, really gleefully. The Board Governance Subcommittee met August 3rd and unanimously recommends the following slate of officers to serve 2-year terms ending in August 2025. Dr. David Cumming as presiding officer, Ms. Cindy Payne as vice presiding officer, and Dr. Ambrosio Hernandez as board secretary. Are there any questions? Well, I insist there are none. The The chair makes the motion to approve Dr. Cummings as presiding officer, Cindy Payne as vice presiding officer, and Dr. Ambrosio Hernandez as board secretary to serve the Oversight Committee for fiscal years 2024 and 25. Is there a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Thank you. Now, the chair will not take up standing
If I
agenda.
could, I'm sorry, if I could interrupt.
You are.
Where's my item? We have a cycling off gift for you, Dr. Patel. I do not like to give these out at the beginning of somebody's term out of self-interest because they could get thrown. They could be used to whack people. But I just want to say on behalf of the staff that you have been a delight to work with. I think you've had a successful 2 years, and we really thank you for your service. We thank all of the Oversight Committee members for your service, but the presiding officer carries an awesome responsibility.
Thank you very much. Should I say to D, if my hammer is bigger than yours?
No,
I dare not
do
say
that
that.
D's the only one who's gotten two.
The question is, are you supposed to pay for that?
It's below $50. No, just a few words, if I may. I really want to thank the executive team and the chairs of the various branches that we have in CPRIT. But I think all of us sit here are really on the backs of the peer reviewers that we have, an extraordinary group of people, over 200.
Yes, sir.
Who make this possible, who review and take time to ensure that we meet the highest standards, not just set within ourselves, but nationally and internationally. And we are an example, I see, of that. The other two people, I think, groups which are essential to be mentioned here, is that you talk about accountability and transparency. Those two are critically important portions of any committee. And I really would like to recognize Ms. McConnell and Mr. Burgess. You do an extraordinary task which ensures that we have legitimacy in the eyes of the peoples of Texas, which is very important. That's whom our fiduciary responsibility lies with, and also to ensure that the transparency and compliance is met at all times at the highest levels possible. I can't thank you enough and your teams for ensuring that we continue to have this great success called CPRIT. Thank you very much. Now to the mundane. We will, yes, yeah, and of course I have to let Dr. Cummings know, the invaluable person sitting to the right of me who prevents me from goofing up all the time, which is quite unique in my case. The chair recognizes CPRIT's communications director, Mr. Mark Loeffler, to update us on CPRIT's communication activities. Mark, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tal. Members, I appreciate it. And congratulations on finishing your term. Thank you. I will go quickly as usual. We're winding down here. So just a couple of things I'd like to point out. You can see in the report on tab 15 in your binder, we did have a very successful visit out to El Paso. Thank you, Mr. Margot, for that. I appreciate that. To highlight the grant, the TREC award that Texas Tech University Health Science Center, El Paso received. So that was very successful, got a lot of good local media coverage. And so thank you for that. I'd like to do more of that in the future. So with the visit to McAllen earlier in the year and this visit to El Paso, sort of setting the expectations for what we can do in the future. So hopefully we'll be able to do more of that. Also want to point out, we did create a new training video. We worked with the product development team to create a video to train new peer reviewers for product development. And it was successfully voiced by our esteemed general counsel, who could have a career in voiceover work if she ever wanted it. She did a great job. So that video is available. It's unlisted, but it's available online for those peer reviewers. So if anyone would like to see that, I'm sure we can share that with you. Other than that, we've got a tremendous amount of work coming up in the fall. We've got lots of work related to conference, of course, which is impending. And then we've kicked off the annual report process as well. So that'll be happening at the same time. You've got social media numbers in the back. They're still trending upwards, which is good. So I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Members, are there any questions for Mr. Loeffler and his team? Mark, I appreciate everything you do and thank you on behalf of the Oversight Committee. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We will not take up standing agenda items 23 or 24. Turning to agenda item 25, the proposed dates for the Oversight Committee's regular quarterly meetings and subcommittee meetings for fiscal year 2024 are in your packet behind tab 18. The next regular Oversight Committee meeting will be on November the 15th. Is there a motion to approve the proposed meeting dates for the regular meetings of the Oversight Committee and the subcommittees for fiscal year 2024?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Doubling back to take up the internal auditor's report under agenda item 10, the chair recognizes Mr. Graves to present his report. At the conclusion of his report, we will move into closed session. Ms. Graves.
Thank you. For our internal audit status report of this quarter, I have no new reports to present to you. That's why you had none in your packet. What I do have is a status for you as to where we are at in the reporting cycle for the plan. Our plan is all but complete with the reports. We finished all the audit work that we were doing. We did not have the reports prepared in time for the audit committee to review, so we didn't have them here, but we have completed our field work for the purchasing audit. We have also completed the field work for the IT general controls re-audit. If you recall, 2 years ago, we did an audit of IT general controls and had some findings. Now we're going back and re-auditing that area. And along with that area, we are also auditing and performing follow-ups over information security, disaster recovery, business continuity, and the one open finding we had in the communications audit that was IT related. So all the IT work's being done at once. We're complete with all of those procedures, and in our reporting phase to be able to sit down with management and walk through the results of those procedures, as well as with purchasing. And then we are finalizing our post-award compliance program. That is an advisory project where we are re-looking at the work that Vince and his team does from a grantee risk assessment, as well as monitoring procedures over those grants. So their audit of their grant recipients. In summary, the risk assessment, we're updating that to look at the grantees in a new way that should reduce the grant monitoring that's being performed over certain recipients who have multiple clean audits by Vince and his team. So if they've had multiple clean audits and there's no other inherent risk with those particular grants, it will reduce the level of monitoring that Vince and his team have to do, and also alleviate some of the pressure on those grant recipients for responding to audit requests. So hopefully it's a more targeted focus of the compliance team's efforts, as well as just providing a break for those grant recipients who have had multiple clean audits. No need to go back to them. So we will have all those reports for you at the next meeting, as well as our annual internal audit report that's required by the Texas Internal Audit Act. The state auditor's office has published their guidance for that for this year. We've reviewed it. There are no substantial changes from last year's guidance that affect CPRIT. So that'll be a report that you're very used to seeing. Any questions?
Thank you. Many questions? Seeing none. Mr. Graves, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The Oversight Committee will move into closed session to receive an update on the internal audit report on information technology, general controls. In addition, we will discuss the fiscal year 2023 DIR Texas Cybersecurity Framework Assessment and personnel action related to the Chief Executive Officer and the Chief Scientific Officer. For the members of the public watching this meeting, other than potential action related to agenda item 20, we have reached the end of our agenda. I do not expect to take up other items after returning from closed session before adjourning the meeting. We go into closed session pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.074 to discuss matters regarding the CEO position and the Chief Scientific Officer position, and Texas Government Code 551.076 to discuss the internal audit addressing information technology general controls and the fiscal year 2023 DIR Texas Cybersecurity Framework Assessment. The following CPRIT staff shall join the Oversight Committee in the closed session: Mr. Roberts, Ms. Doyle, Lisa Nelson, Mr. Burgess, Mr. Nance, Ms. McConnell, Ms. Eckel, Shannon Cusick, Suma Emenike, and Mr. Graves. The time is 11:17. So the board now reconvenes in open session. The time is 12:01. Pursuant to our discussion in closed session, is there a motion to set the exempt salary of the Chief Scientific Officer to the legislatively authorized $639,300 effective on or after September 1, 2023?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Pursuant to our discussion in closed session, is there a motion to set the exempt salary for the Chief Executive Officer position to the legislatively authorized $282,277 effective on or after September 1st, 2023?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. If there is no further business and there's no objection, the chair moves to adjourn this meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The motion carries. The meeting stands adjourned at, well, 12:02. The gavel, yes. The